The nicest components in the world don't matter if the install sucks. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Tinker Motorsports and Fab. My name is Brandon. Today, 2006 LBZ Crew Cab Long Bed Dually. The Tow Pig. The new bad manners. Well, yeah. Anyway, been wanting to do this for a long time. New battery, new cap in place of one of the batteries. All of the cabling upgrades for both batteries, not just one, and a big three. Three awesome, awesome names going on this truck. Excess Power, Mechman Alternators, CE Auto Electric Supply. Those are my go-tos. Let's get it. All right, so what we got here is my Crew Cab Long Bed LBZ, tow rig that I use for dragging Tinker around. And the alternator and the batteries, I got lucky enough to where all of them timed out together right at the end of the winter. Because I couldn't bring myself to put fresh batteries in it and just let it sit around all winter. It doesn't get driven a lot when I'm not racing. But, right yeah, Excess Power, Mechman 400 amp alternator, and CE Auto Electric Supply. Right there. They make a kit. CE Auto Electric Supply makes a kit. I have to go back and look up exactly what they call it, but it's a combination of all new battery cables with the factory replacements. You know, so for example, your little tab right there that goes in your junction box. Really nice side posts so that you don't have to go to a top post and change everything. I mean, all of your grounds, your small power wires to go into over to your fuse box. For the dual battery setup, they run side to side, both sides time in together. I tell you what, I found CE probably about 4 years ago when I was wiring up Tinker, and I was sold. It is the best cable I have ever worked with, hands down. I mean, for example, this big 3 is 2/0, not 2 gauge, 2/0. Look at that. For years and years, I was going to the welding supply where I get all my welding gear and stuff like that, and was just buying welding lead. That was my go-to. When I found CE, it was a game changer. I'm a fan of making my own cables. I've got hydraulic crimpers and everything. You know, I know what I'm doing. The Auto Electric Supply, they make combo units. Sorry, Tony. I might have to go back and edit. Can't remember what you said. But they are a dealer for Mechman. And you can get your battery cables, your big 3, and the alternator of your choice in one kit, ready to go, delivered to your house. You can't beat it. They take the legwork out of it for you. I will throw this out here. The 400s do require a different length belt because of that really tiny pulley right there. I think Tony at CE has that information on his website. I know Mechman does. So yeah, they make it easy as well. All right, guys, this is going to be a little bit weird because I lost the audio somehow when I was making the video, so I'm doing voiceovers here, but you can see that I've already pulled out the passenger side battery, the driver's side battery. The alternator is out, and here I'm going over talking about that alternator mount and those 2 bushings. One right there, one on the other side. Those 2 bushings actually slide in and out of the aluminum housing. So when you've got your alternator bolts in there, what happens is you've got the thread on the backside, and those bolts actually pull that bushing in tight and slide very tightly in that aluminum mount. So I've got, right now they're soaked in Kroil. I'm about to go over the Kroil in a little bit. Here I'm showing those things are in there tight, or they should be. So you can take a small screwdriver or something from the left side where I was just showing, and then start to pry up on it. When you get it up a little bit, you can go where the light is showing right there, and then go from the center, kind of at an angle, This is what I'm talking about, the coil, how it's the best stuff in the world. And you can't convince me otherwise. I do go into, I've heard about automatic transmission fluid and acetone, mixing it. You can go on the internet and check that out and maybe put it in a squirt bottle. Maybe it'll work for you. But yeah, going back to this mount here, just going back over the prying it out. And one thing to keep in mind after you get it out and those bushings are soaked with that coil a little bit, hopefully you can come inside and tap them back towards the radiator. Yep, from that direction right there. And give yourself a little bit of slop for that alternator to go back down in. And then when you put the bolt back in, they're just going to slide back home and pinch that alternator in place. But be careful, don't get crazy with it, because that mount is cast aluminum, and cast does not flex much. It just goes ping, and you're going to have a bad day. You're done at that point. So just be careful, and that's any casting. Cast aluminum, cast steel, cast iron. It's rigid. It doesn't like to flex. So be smart when you're going in there trying to tap those things out of there. You don't want to cause yourself a bad day getting that thing to slide out. If they don't want to come out for you, not a big deal. You can just tap the alternator ever so gently from the top to get that thing back in place. All right, moving on. All right, more of the voiceovers here. So we've got the top off of the battery box. Excuse me, not the battery box, your fuse box. And then we've got the cover off of that. And here I'm pointing out where one of your new positive leads from your new assembly is going to go. That's where the old one went, right there. That's where it was. Another one snakes through here to the back side, into that fuse right there, that 175 amp little fuse. That was a 13 millimeter socket on that. That was a 7 millimeter socket on the other one. And yep, that little guy right there. And then I think right here I was talking about how that's a mechanical locking nut, so it grabs the entire time you're trying to pull it off. And it's tight all the way off, so just be careful with that. That's not a piece that you want to break. Showing how all of this is about to get pulled back down through. There's your ground right there, running down through that point. Make a note. Try to make a note or take pictures on how that stuff goes through. That ground right there runs around over top of the frame rail to the front. And if you look right down here through your toe pocket, or where your hook is, that is where that ground attaches to, with two more that are probably for your headlights. I'm not sure, I didn't trace it. But that ground runs through right there. Now, when the new kit goes together, I am not sure just yet at this point if it's going to land back in that same spot. If it does not, you need to make sure that you put the one ground back nice and clean, bare metal. Put a little bit of no-ox or something on there just to keep it from to keep that ground good. Grounds are essential, absolutely essential. So yeah, not sure if that's going to go back in that same spot or not. I'll go through the directions. The directions are really good, but we'll see. At this point, I'm not exactly sure, so I'm still just talking about that thing right there. Excuse me. Now I'm coming up underneath and trying to find a spot where I can show you the ground on the block. It is really hard to get a camera up in there. But right up in here is where your block ground is going to be. You do have a little braided strap coming off. You can see it teeing off that block right there, coming into there. I think there's something in the instructions as well that talks about possibly removing that and replacing it with another ground that they put in the kit. Like I said, this is the next day, and all right, more voiceover stuff, trying to remember what I said the day before and time it as I'm watching the video. Kind of weird. But here you can see I've got the fender skirt out. Makes this easy. Definitely take it out. Showing you the factory power and the ground, which I've removed the plastic from a previous experiment I was working on. There I'm pointing out the power and the ground to the noisemaker underneath the back seat for the CB. Let's see here. Yep. Now you can see the starter both battery positives coming into the starter, and you can see the ground right there where it's got the copper showing. That's the factory ground for the passenger side battery. 15 millimeter socket on that bolt. And pretty sure here's where I'll start talking about, yep, so you need that right there is for your diesel guys, that is your block warmer. So that's your 120 volt plug that runs up top that hangs out for you for the winter. I was talking about how most of my sheathing and stuff was just falling apart, but you're going to need to, if yours isn't, you're going to need to cut that back and expose all of that, because that's going to stay and get tie wrapped to your new cable assembly. So your block warmer, that's going to stay. You need to cut those tie wraps loose, get all that wire loom off of there, expose that where it runs through just underneath your lower radiator hose, and leave that in place, because your kit does not replace that. So you need to make sure that you leave that in a somewhat factory routing. That way you can tie it all back up together whenever you start snaking in all of your new cables. Let's see, what am I doing here? Can't remember. Oh yeah, so we've already talked about that stuff. Now that little cable holder right there bolts to the bottom of the oil pan, and with two they were M6s, two 10 millimeter sockets, and then the cable runs through that backside where I just had it flipped over. That's where your positive cable runs across. And I'm talking about right inside of here is where the ground location is, pretty sure. Sorry about this, guys. Definitely not the way I wanted to do it, but trying to make the best of it. Oh, let's see here. What are we getting ready to go over here? Probably talking about how make sure that you, probably going back to your block warmer and cutting things off. Don't get confused. Don't cut that wire. 13 millimeter socket inside there. It's kind of difficult to get to, but that's why we pulled that fender skirt out, because it's kind of tight, and then both of those wires get snaked back through. Right down there where that purple wire is. That purple wire is your starter solenoid from your key. More voiceover fun. All right, here we go. All right, so all of the cabling is taken out. You can see, I'm trying to get focused here, that right there is where your ground was, which I don't have cleaned up yet, because that is going to get super clean. And I'm trying to point out that little hole that you saw there goes up on a stud. That was what you just saw, was your transmission cooler lines. The little clip that isolates your transmission cooler lines. This right here also goes on that stud, and that is where your two positives came through, right inside that clip. That's where your two positives came through for both your batteries and landed on that starter that you just saw. So that is a 10 millimeter socket that goes on that slides over that stud. That stud captures this piece you're looking at and the piece that's still on the truck for your two transmission lines. And be careful with this stuff, because at this point I still don't know if this is going back in place. Probably not, but the clip that holds the transmission lines will. And be careful with these plastic parts. They live a hard life. They get hot down there, soaked in junk. They can be brittle. So yep, going back to, I don't know if it's gonna focus or not. Yep, right there. That's that little clip that's plastic that's still on there, and you can see it holding the two transmission lines. And once again, your ground points, make them super clean. Here, I think I'm still talking about whether or not we're going to put that back on. That right there is the whole harness. That's everything that got pulled out. So nothing was cut. Everything came out. Going back through here. All right, so now we're getting to the junction box where your jump start is for your battery positive, excuse me. The instructions note out putting some tie wraps on it to keep it tight, and then use a step drill and open up the factory holes to 5/8. You're looking at the instructions right there. Those are the instructions for the big three. So I followed their instructions, used that step drill, which is right there, and it tells you opening it up to 5/8 is only necessary if you get the 1/0 kit, which I did. That process worked out just fine. You can see where I got the top and the bottom hole taken care of. I think this is where I go into how awesome step drills are to have around, because if you were going to try to drill that with a 5/8 drill, more than likely you wouldn't have that sitting around, because most drill indexes only go to a 1/2 inch. And if you're going to spend the money on a 5/8 drill, just buy a step drill anyway. It's less likely to bite. It only cuts on 1 flute at a time versus 2, so it's not going to bite into that plastic and rip it out of your hand and tear your box up. But that turned out really good. I think I'm probably talking about how I went in there with a file, because a step drill actually drills on a taper. You know, you can see it right there, like a pyramid. So just keep that in mind. If you're drilling any type of depth, when it goes in, you're actually drilling on a taper. You're not making a through hole. And because you've got depth right there, I went back in with a little round file and just squared it up. You can go back in with a razor blade and clean that stuff up. But it worked out really good. So far, these instructions that I've been reading through, they are on point. These guys did their homework. Not only making the cables, putting the kit together, but also documenting it. So here I'm just talking about, you know, how the step drill works and how awesome they are, how they're nice to have around. Definitely worth having. I think Irwin makes a pretty good one. You can go to Lowe's or Home Depot, I would imagine. Maybe Menards if you got those guys around. But yeah, it doesn't require anything on the other side, that little slot. You don't have to open that one up. It's just 5/8 if you're using the 1/0. The 1/0 kit, which it shows it right there in the instructions. So can't remember what I'm still talking about, you know, but hey, talking about the razor blade, blah, blah, blah. Man, this is so much easier when you're doing it for real. I will not make this mistake again. Yeah, just talking about how good the instructions are, follow them. They do great. We're going to cut it off at that, because I can't remember what else I was blabbing about. All right, so part of me didn't even want to show this, because I don't want anybody to tear their stuff up. But you can see what I did there. I went to set the alternator in, and like I was talking about earlier, those little bushings right there, they get pressed in, and then that's where they live since 2006. And I coiled them, tried to come in there with the brass end of my mallet, tap this way. They still didn't want to move. Went to put the alternator in, and it was really snug, and I didn't want to roll a burr back in there. I'd already put some no-ox on there and on the bushing side to help it slide in. I did not want to have to tap on this really nice alternator. So what I did was made a little jacking bolt here out of some of my mill hold down tooling and a piece of 3/8 threaded rod, all thread, and then made a little jack to go in there and start backing them off and spreading them. Here's where I didn't even want to bring it up. You cannot, I repeat, cannot just keep jacking on these bolts and press that thing out. You will pop the ears off of this casting. You got to be smart about it, folks. So come in, put a little pressure on it, then take your brass mallet right over here, start tapping on it like that. Sorry if that was noisy. Don't use steel. Steel's harder than aluminum. It's going to tear it up. Use brass or another piece of aluminum, adrift, and you'll hear it pop, and you'll see this get loose. It's pressure and tapping here. You can't just crank on this thing and wait for that to start to move. More than likely, that ear is going to break off before this moves. It's pressure and tap, pressure and tap. Be patient, go slow, use your head. You will break these off if you're not careful. Be smart about it. I showed you, use it to your advantage. Don't tear your stuff up. Use your head, folks. All right, so starting to get this stuff back in. I'll show it from the top. They talk about this in the instructions, and keep in mind, the starter lead is not, it's not bolted down right now. So when I square it up and rotate it where it should be, it's not touching your starter solenoid lead. But like I said, they talk about the instructions to double check this. I see what they're talking about. It's just the size of that right angle lug to get 2 1/0 wires in that thing. You know, it's just big. They bring it up in the instructions to verify this. So, and if you read the instructions, you know not to lock anything down. And they were correct. So once again, when it's locked down, it's not touching, but it's closer than I would like it to be. So I'm going to snake it back out of there and just take a little bit of material off, clearance it on the bottom to give us a little bit more room. Once again, when you bolt it up, it doesn't touch, but I'm going to give it a little bit extra room. Read the instructions. They're good. All right, so this is your 2 1/0 tied together. That is your starter lead. And you can see right here where I've clearanced it a little bit. I just used a flapper disc on a grinder. Came in there, gave us a little bit more room right here. All super good. Something else I'm about to show y'all. So this is a caveat to using really nice cable. So if you come over here, these are your 2 factory cables, and you can see this stuff is stiff as can be, which allows you to form it. So when that guy is sitting up in there, they're formed to get down around the motor mount plate. And that is why CE puts extra braiding on it and shrink wraps it. Now this cable has really, really, really nice insulation, but what I'm going to do, this is just edging. I've had this stuff around forever. I can't even remember where I got it, but more than likely you can get it off Amazon. So it's got a little metal inside and some pretty thick plastic. I do this around all edges or sharp edges that I have to run cable through. So right down in here, if you look, it's hard to see. So there's your starter lead right there. Excuse me, your starter post where you're going to be landing. And it's really hard to see, guys, but right down in there is where those things need to snake around. Right on that little rusty edge. So what I'm going to do is take that edging and run down around that just to give it added protection. That way, in case these things won't hold form the way that I want them to, we've got some edging to take away the risk of chafing and wearing through anything. Would it ever happen? I don't know. Like I said, that's really, really nice insulation on there. Then they've got some extra on the outside of it, shrink wrap so it's not going to move. That's why it's there, because it has the possibility to be a high abrasive area. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with adding extra. So if you got some of this laying around, you can order it. Probably, like I said, Amazon. I have also taken fuel line, and depending on the size you need, 1/4 inch, 3/8. But you can take some fuel line if you need to in a pinch. I actually have it on this truck in places. Take the section you need, cut a slit down through it carefully so you don't end up making a boo-boo. Cut a slit down through it, and then you can open it up and just pinch it over whatever you want. But yeah, anytime you've got an edge you're running the cable around that could chafe it, or a highly abrasive area, I try to get in there and help it out as much as I can. All right, there is zero room for this deal here. So I can't use the tripod. I'm gonna try to, that's about as good as we're gonna get right there. So what you're seeing there on the block, that is your ground for the battery cable kit. So that guy ties into the factory location, right? And then loops back around and lands on your negative battery terminal. Your two reds there, those are your two conductors. Sorry, I'm trying to think about all these conductors as I'm explaining it. Those are your two conductors right there. One runs up to the positive terminal of your passenger side battery, and the other one makes a turn around the oil pan and heads towards the driver's side battery. All right, so we are moving forward. We got the AGM in over there, got the cap in over there. I've got my my fuse holder up on the firewall there. Alternator is in. Ground for the alternator is landed. Our bad boy right there running up to what's going to be the 400 amp fuse in the fuse holder. Everything is landed up here on one side of the fuse box, on the other side of the fuse box right down in there. But I came across something. So XS uses these side post adapters, right? They go, well, that's negative, but you know what I'm saying. Something that I noticed, if I can do this with one hand, is you can see how that just squares up on it, and the plastic down there at the bottom. See the distance between the plastic right here where my finger is and the aluminum? So that's really proud. This one I already milled down. That's really proud. So what was happening is that the plastic down here on the outer ring was hitting right there and keeping this off of it. It was sitting out like this. Now, over here on the mill, you can actually see how thick that is versus that one. Well, the mill's already locked down, but the mill vise. But there you go. I cut it probably in half. Now, you don't have to use a mill, but I've got one, and gives me a reason to make chips, even if they're plastic. You could have also stacked probably 2 half-inch washers in there. That would have worked. Or if you got a lathe and some copper stock and you wanted to make a slug and go in there, that would have worked. But depending on what I change in the future, I don't want to, and putting it together, I don't want to worry about losses in between stacking washers and all that stuff. And then down here, you know, when you go to put your side post in, you know, you got to put a washer in there. I just didn't want to deal with it. So I'm taking the time to do that. That's your top right there. You can see the little notch on the side post adapter. Goes in the notch right there. Once again, this is positive, that's negative, I know. But I'm just taking the time to do that now. So you don't have to have a mill. If you wanted to use a sharp razor blade, you could. I wouldn't recommend that. Probably just a flapper disc, you know, and just knock this down to the height. I took it down right, almost gave myself a proof mark right off this top edge, and that seemed to be enough. So yeah, I did notice that, but that would be a bummer to go to land everything, and then you start tightening things up and realize that your terminal is actually cockeyed a little bit. So I'm not sure if that's common practice for XS, or if that height right there was designed to seal around the original factory wiring boot. That's probably what it is, because your factory ones, that terminal kind of floats in that rubber, and it allows the, yep, now that I think about it, that's exactly what it is. So just something to know about. If you're going to go with XS, use their side post adapters, and with these really, really nice, man, those things are nice. Those cast lugs, as you can see right there, when you tighten your bolt up from the outside, there's nothing for that to float in. So that is an issue. So if you go to do that, just let that be known. And I'm going to go back through. This is just about done. I've already got everything landed. The last thing that I need to do, the power is good. And I'll go back over this when I get there, but this is the ground off the alternator right there. The factory ground replacement is going down back inside where it was. And then that guy right there is coming off the negative post of the passenger side battery and is going to land right on top of this guy, get pinched. And I got to decide a place on the frame rail to put it. Might be right in there, something like that. And then get that all shined up, drilled and tapped. But yeah, I wasn't going to make another video until I was done and then go back over what was done between the last one and this one. But then, you know, I came across that deal right there. You can see the height's different. So not a big deal. Hopefully y'all watch this video in prep for this job and you see it so you're aware of it and don't have to pull things back apart. But like I said, no big deal. Moving on. All right, so we got the passenger side here, which is where the majority of the work went into trying to figure out how to route everything. And I've got my handy dandy little poker here so that I can try to stay out of camera so you guys keep a good view. But if you note right down there, that's my grounding location, right above or right off the corner of your factory location for your passenger side brake line. So you can see that's a common grounding location right there, which is called out in the instructions. Once again, the reason I'm making this is so somebody could reference it and then come back and see what I found. Once again, my opinion is the best way to do things. You want to call it best, cleanest, whatever. But anyway, so this guy right here running up, that is one of the big 3 wires. So that is the ground off your alternator case right through there, landing home. Then you've got this guy right here running up through underneath, coming all the way across and looping up. That is the big 3 to the passenger side battery. In my case, that big capacitor, but same thing. The factory side battery right there lands in a common location here on the frame rail, which is drilled and tapped per the instructions. You can see here that is the existing factory wire for your block heater. So I just tied that in and ran it back up home. This conductor here is part of the battery upgrade kit. So that's your battery wiring that goes to your side post terminal right there and runs all the way back through the loom, back around. And then this guy here, that is your positive conductor that comes in the kit with the battery cable kit for your positive battery terminal on your passenger side battery. So once again, alternator big 3 upgrade, big 3 upgrade for battery ground. That guy right there is your cable kit, negative. That guy right there is your cable kit, positive. And if you're wondering about these 2 over here, that's my power and ground running back to the linear, the CB amplifier in the back of the truck. And those are tied in to the capacitor on the passenger side, which would be your passenger side battery. And I'll explain that when we get back to the top. But that's the reason you saw that circuit breaker up there and a couple extra wires on top that most people wouldn't usually see. Something I want to point out right here is that there's your shock. The shock has quite a bit of thread sticking out of the shock mounting nut. So what I utilized was a P-clamp. I love some P-clamps. They're great. Wrapped in rubber right there. You can get them from Lowe's, Home Depot. They're quick to get. I used the P-clamp here, used the existing thread that was sticking out of the top of the shock mount to attach that P-clamp. That is an M8 thread. So an 8mm threaded nut, which would be a 13mm socket. You can put a washer down, install the P-clamp, put a washer on top and an 8mm nut, run that down and secure that to one conductor, and then everything else is tie wrapped to it. So, I mean, you can see everything is held tight. It's not going to get into anything. The factory liner in this configuration will still bolt back in the way it's supposed to. I don't know if you can see it on camera or not, but up here and some other wires that have just been hanging loose for a while, I'll put some new loom on those, just because the old plastic stuff on these trucks, it goes through heat cycles and just gets all messed up and basically just turns to dust in your hand. So while I was in here, I re-loomed some stuff and tied it up and kept it happy. One thing that you cannot see is one of the passenger side existing grounds right there runs to the stud right next to it. Is that in the camera? Yeah, we might be able to, yep, right there. So yeah, that covers the passenger side. Like I said, drilled and tapped right there. I'm pretty sure that's a 3/8, 18, 16. I don't know. It's in the instructions. The C instructions are great. Follow them to a T. What I'm doing with this video is giving examples of how to route without cutting anything, without modifying anything, and how it all ties in. And if you use this as an example, it works out perfect. So now I'm going to show down where the starter is and some of the things that I did around there. It's really difficult to get to. There's no light and it's tight. So we'll see if I can cover that good for y'all. All right, so it doesn't seem like it wants to focus too good. That's not too bad. All right, so trying to stay out of the way here. Here you can see your starter leads right there. So that is part of your CE battery cable kit. So that's your two 1/0s tied together, running into that lug. You should have already seen where I came in and I did clean off that lug a little bit right there, because you can see right here, that is your starter solenoid hot off the key. And it didn't touch. It would have worked fine the way it was. Because I said I didn't modify anything, but I guess I did. But not for the purpose of it wouldn't work. I just like to give myself a little bit more clearance. Because if that guy right there ever touches this guy, it's going to create a start condition and the starter is going to engage. So I did adjust that, but only because that's what I wanted to do, not because it's required. Here, I did a little add-on. That is a vacuum plug. You can get them from Napa, Advance, AutoZone, whatever. It's just a vacuum plug kit. They're cheap. Just to give myself a little bit of insurance there in case this ever decided to loosen up, because we got that big honking cable end on it. I took a vacuum plug and put on your starter solenoid hot lead coming in from the key, put a little bit of super glue on it, and just glued that guy in place. And I checked it. I actually went to pull it off and it don't want to come off. So happy with that. I think it's out of camera a little bit, but the starter solenoid hot right there, once again, more of that plastic loom from GM that's fallen off. So I re-loomed that. And then if you look right there, see that black strip running through here, and then there's more of it in the back. These really nice 1/0 cables were never designed to go there. The cables that you're going to pull off, you'll see, are preformed. They're bent in two 90-degree angles, and that is to wiggle around your motor mount. There's no good way. These won't preform. That's the whole point of the really nice, super high strand, flexible cable, so it's easy to work with. But you can't preform it. So there's no good way to keep it from touching over in here. So what I did was, this is edging that you can get from Amazon, or it's edging to go on sharp metal edges. So what I did was installed it here, and you can see down there, and then it runs up through here around that. That way it doesn't over time vibrate and eat through that insulation. That is really nice insulation. It's super thick. It would probably never even happen, but we're here, take our time. If we can improve on anything, go ahead and do it. Now's the time. Don't want to have problems with it. So yeah, edging around here, and also any other area that I thought might be chafing into insulation over time, just go ahead and remedy it, make it better. Yep, so that covers the starter side, and then these loop down and go in between the oil pan and that motor mount, headed towards the front. All right, right here, right there, that little guy. So that's another location that I replaced with a rubber P-clamp. Well, it's metal, but it's wrapped in rubber. This guy right here is what was in that location. So it would actually be sitting like this. That's the way it was in there, just like that. And if you look right there, you see a little shiny spot. See a little shiny spot right there? That is actually where the upper radiator hose, or excuse me, lower radiator hose, passenger side, right there, was rubbing on it. Now, I've had the front of this truck apart. I cleaned the stack last summer. So, you know, everything works perfect until you take things apart. And it doesn't matter even if you put it back in the same holes, it's never the same way. So that's the reason I got rid of this dude and put a P-clamp on there. So now you can see that little gap right there. It's tiny, but if that hose ever swells, you know, while we're towing in the summer, it's gonna swell. It's just what happens. Instead of having to try to tie the hose up or relocate things, if it swells, something shifts, things do move while you're driving. Things get hot, things get cold, things move around. This takes care of the issue with that rubber riding on that, and it allows us to route a conductor through it without having to worry about things chafing over time, you know, eating through the loom, getting into insulation. So yeah, another P-clamp there. They work great. I love them. And you're going to see we use them on the oil pan as well. All right, so really tight under here, guys, but you can get a frame of reference. So we're looking from the center of the truck towards the passenger side. You can see where the steering stabilizer is. You can see where your two transmission lines, where the plastic clip is, and that piece of loomed wire hanging down. That piece of loomed wire is your starter solenoid back to your key. So you can kind of get a frame of reference there on what's going on. And just inside that is that little cable isolator bracket that you have to remove. And that's what initiated all the edging around the motor mount and all that stuff. So now if we come around here, right up through there, sorry, I know it's tight, but now you can see right there, there's your oil pan. You got your 2 bolts for the oil pan that also used an isolator bracket to run your cabling through. More P-clamps there. I used P-clamps to hold that back in place. I'll try to get a better angle of it. Then you can see your starter solenoid cable from your key running across, snaking up through, and then right up through there you can see your ground that was coming off the cable ground, or the block ground that I just showed you. So that's how those things are snaked through there. It worked really good. So right there, I can't see my finger, but one P-clamp on the right, which would be the driver's side of the oil pan, one P-clamp on the left, the way I'm looking at it, which would be the passenger side, if you want to call it, you know, splitting from the center. And then right there, I added another one. So that's an M8 thread in a boss up there on the oil pan that was not existing. I added that one as well. And that helps hold that cable in place to make that turn, to go from running across the front of the truck to head back towards the firewall. And it worked out really good. Everything is isolated through there. Nothing's touching each other. Nothing can wiggle or vibrate and shake down on something else. And it worked really good. There's actually more room in real life, but the camera's being a pain trying to pick that up. Also, in the CE instructions, it actually talks about this piece of heat wrap here to slide it where you want it. So I did slide it down to where I thought it was critical, and then clamped it down there. Yeah, worked out really, really good. Super happy about it. All right, so moving over just a hair towards the driver's side, you can see we just talked about that P-clamp right there on the driver's side of the oil pan. And right there is your driver's side ground that your new CE kit for the driver's side battery is going to land to. And there's also another ground that ties in with that out of the factory harness. So make sure you don't lose that one or leave it flopping. But yep, that is your driver's side battery ground to the block right there. All right, right here you can see driver's side. There's your tow hook. There's your fog lamp if you got them. Right in through the tow hook hole is a ground right there that comes off of your driver's side factory harness, or excuse me, your new CE, also factory, but your new CE kit has a ground coming off of your driver's side battery. I think it might be an 8 gauge. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. But that's the location it ties into. I didn't look at those other two tiny little wires coming off there, probably for headlights. I didn't trace them down, but make sure you put that one back on too. Once again, all your ground. All right, so right down there, right off the corner of your water pump where your belt sits, that's another P-clamp that I put in there to get the battery positive right there that runs up by your fuel pump cap into your jump box. Don't break it like I did. Yeah, I got a tie wrap on it for now. I ain't happy about it, but yeah, so right down there, right there, P-clamp right there, holding your battery wire coming back up through to the driver's side. Also something right there. So on your upper power steering pump hose, those little factory clamps that they use where you got to put pliers on them and pinch them to rotate them, that was actually rotated 90 degrees from where it is here towards the driver's side. And that would have created a sharp edge that would eat into the side of that cable. So I rotated that up to the 12 o'clock position. Right here on what is your grounding point for a jump. You can see the black there. I put some shrink wrap on it because once you put that 1/0 cable in here, it makes it really close right there. Now, if you wanted to bend this over, you could. I don't really want to pinch this over and shove this down because this leaves me an air gap so it doesn't rub on my upper radiator hose. So right now it is touching, just a hair, but really nice insulation on your positive cable. And then I put shrink wrap on that. That way these two do not ever rub through and create a short to ground right there. So you can see the excess excess power gel battery in right here, side post adapters, CE battery kit ground, CE battery kit positive. We already talked about the 2 landing locations off the positive cable that run into somewhere around right here and then around back. One thing we haven't talked about yet is you need a field supply to power the alternator, and that is this guy right here. So it's part of the harness that comes with excess power's alternator. We'll get into that. But I ran it through here, right through here, underneath, brought it in right through there, and used a fuse tap right there so you can see the original red 10 amp fuse on the bottom, and then they call out a 5 amp fuse up here, and that goes into your ignition hot. So when you turn the key, it sends 12 volts for the field to turn on the alternator. All right, so the job is done. 2006 Duramax crew cab long bed dually, CE auto supply, battery, and big 3 kit. It was the 1-aught kit for the battery cables and the 2-aught kit for the big 3. Excess power, AGM battery on the passenger side, and 500 farad capacitor in the auxiliary location. Mechman Alternators 400 amp Elite Series alternator. It went really well. I spent a lot of time making this video trying to make things simple and show everybody cable routing and things like that so that you could basically mirror it. Disclaimer, something goes wrong, I'm sorry, but I did it to the best of my ability to kind of show everybody what I went through and go through some of the details. The nicest components in the world don't matter if the install sucks. Cables, alternators, amplifiers, engines, I don't care what it is. You can have unlimited budget and buy the nicest stuff in the world. And if the installation is crap, junk in is junk out. That's it. You know, on all of your joints, you know, no ox them. And I keep saying no ox. No ox is non-oxidizer. You can get it at Lowe's. I think it's called OxGuard or something is a brand, but dielectric grease, no ox, something. Good, clean grounds, shiny metal, no paint. Use your star washers where the instructions say to use star washers. CE Auto Supply put a lot of thought into the directions. The directions are great. The only thing that it doesn't do is show you all the cable routing, which is what I tried to add to show you all the scenarios that I went through to come up with the final product. So this is going to be a long outro, but I just want everybody to understand why I was doing what I was doing. Just trying to let you guys get a visual on my end result. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember, junk in is junk out on an install. Nice components don't do any good if the installation is not 100%. If the manufacturer provides instructions, follow them. If you have a question, call them. Don't ask Facebook groups. Call the manufacturer. They know. They know. Just call them. Get the gospel. Get it from the people that made the product. You know, Facebook groups are good for certain things. Other things, they are not. All right, enough of that rant. Hope you guys enjoyed it. 2006 Duramax crew cab long bed dually. Excess power, CE auto electric supply, Mechman alternators. You can't go wrong. See it through. Do it right the first time. Hey, Brandon Culleton, Tinker Motorsports and Fab. I'll see y'all next time. Hope you enjoyed it.